Okay, so my name is Carol Weinshell, Vice President of Programming and Membership at Congregation Rodeph Sholom in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Today is January 26th for Coffee and Conversation, which we do close to twice a month. We've been doing it since the beginning of COVID and have found it to be a very good program, not because it's mine, but because it's a good program. We've laughed, we've cried, we've learned, and we find that our people have so much to offer. So this morning, we're going to hear from Gracey Oksenberg, and she's going to tell us her story. Now, I heard her story yesterday because we practiced, which is the best thing we can do when we're doing a program. And it is fascinating. You're going to be just amazed. You're going to love hearing her. She does a beautiful job. So I'm going to ask you, please, to stay muted once she's introduced you, because anything you say will come through on the recording, and I don't want her to be distracted at all. So with that said, Gracey, if you would introduce, and then each person you introduce could mute, we'll be ready to go.
Okay, well, as I see them on the
Oh, I gotta put my
screen
head-
here, I lost her. The first one I see on the screen here is my niece, Shoshana Walker. She lives in Alabama with her family. We also have Nadine, another niece, Nadine Cohen, and she lives in Chicago. Then my sister and her family, Cecile, her husband Marty, and my niece Michelle and her husband Chris are all together. They're actually visiting from Tennessee, and actually tomorrow is Marty's 80th birthday, so they came up to surprise him for his birthday. And let's see who else we have here. There's hang on. I think I saw Joanna and Adela. Adela's my sister-in-law, and there they are. And, yeah, they're in New Jersey, and Joanna is her daughter, of course, and another niece. And I think I just saw Charlie's sister, Suzanne Barrelson. There she is. She too is celebrating her 80th tomorrow, so she lives in New Jersey as well. Okay, so
Okay, did we do everybody who's family then?
I think I got everybody that's here, right? Did I miss anyone from the family who's here? No, I don't think so. We've got everybody.
So Charlie is letting you have center stage today, correct?
That's right. That's right. Hang on one second. I don't know where Charlie. Yeah. Suzanne is on. Come on. He was worried that his sister did not come on, but she did. So yeah, Charlie is here with me. Okay, so we'll get started. I want to thank Carol for inviting me to speak today. Her request actually had come at a very opportune time, because a little over a year ago, I started working on a family album, and I wanted it to be complete with family history and how our family came to be in Sudan. I was only 9 when my family emigrated from Sudan to the United States. So I reached out to my brothers, Raymond of blessed memory and Solomon, and my sister Cecile, to get the information that I wanted to put in the family history for my album. And 2 of my mother's brothers, Eliyahu and David Malka, had written books about Sudan, so I referenced those to get the history of early Sudan so that I could use it today. And my niece, Joanna Sasson, that who you met a short while ago, she had done a presentation last year about this topic. So it was very helpful for me to follow her outline as I was preparing for today. So credit for a lot of today's information goes to them as well. So Sudan's Jewish history can be traced back to the mid-1880s, when there were about 8 Jewish families living in the town of Omdurman. They dealt in exporting Sudan's products and importing what was needed. The country at that time was under Egyptian Turkish rule, and everyone was free to practice their own religion until a rebel by the name of Muhammad Ahmad ibn Abdullah al-Mahdi led a revolt and eventually seized control of Sudan in 1885. He became leader and then passed a law that everyone, Jews and Christians, must convert to Islam or face death. They were also forced to marry Muslim women and attend prayer services in the Grand Mosque. Secretly, though, many Jews still prayed Shachrit at home before going to the mosque, and they continued with their Jewish traditions at home behind closed doors. This lasted for 13 years, when in 1898, al-Mahdi himself was overthrown by an Anglo-Egyptian group led by the British General Kitchener. And interesting side note is that one of the soldiers who was serving under Kitchener was a young Winston Churchill. So English rule was established after al-Mahdi was overthrown, and the converted families were able to return to Judaism. The British then built a railway between the capital cities of Cairo, Egypt, and Khartoum, Sudan, which opened up a route for traders to use, and those traders included many Jews. So by 1900, Jewish merchants from the Middle East, from North Africa, wound up settling in Sudan, mainly in the four northern cities of Khartoum, Khartoum North, Omdurman, and Wad Madani. As their businesses flourished and their community grew, they rented a room and created a makeshift synagogue. They still had no rabbi, though, until 1906, when my maternal grandfather, Rabbi Shlomo Malka, his wife Hannah, and the first 2 of their 10 children came to Sudan at the request of Egyptian Jewish religious authorities who oversaw the affairs of the Sudanese Jews. The other 8 children that they had, the other 8 of the 10, and that included my mother, Allegra Simcha, they were all born in Sudan. My grandfather himself was born in Morocco, and as a young man, he went to Tiberias, Palestine, which is Israel now, of course, and he went there to study and to be ordained a rabbi. So he became Sudan's chief rabbi, cantor, moil, shochet, mashgiach, sort of a jack of all trades, I guess you could say. He prepared the boys for their bar mitzvah, teaching them Hebrew prayers. And he also converted many of the Muslim women who had married Jewish men during al-Mahdi's reign, and their children too. Some of these women became very devout, and they remained Jewish their entire lives. My grandfather served the community for almost 45 years until he passed away in 1949. In this first slide that Carol will put up, it's my grandfather. Okay. Here he is on the left. He always wore the rabbinical garb unless he was traveling. And that's the only time when he would wear a suit and a tie and a hat, as you can see here. In the next slide, this is my grandfather again, and here he's wearing the formal rabbinical dress, and that's my grandmother Hannah next to him. A mikveh was built in my grandparents' home, and my grandmother Hannah would set it up. She would make the arrangements for the bride that day, and she would ensure that no men were in the house while the mikveh was taking place. Ladies in the family and close friends were invited afterwards for a small get-together with all kinds of desserts being served. When married women wanted to use the mikveh, they made private individual appointments with my grandmother.
What you give at the end of the day, right? Who's the best?
So Brit Milot were done in the afternoon at the home of the new parents. While holding the boy, the sandak would sit on a special canopied wooden chair that was housed in the synagogue and brought to the parents' home in the morning, then returned afterwards, of course. After the Brit Milah, ice cream and chocolate and baked goods were served with a dinner feast at night for the immediate family. Now, my father's family originated in Baghdad, Iraq. My grandfather, Sasson Ezra Chazma, was a merchant, and he and my grandmother had 4 sons. This is my grandmother, Masuda, in the next slide.
Okay, hold on, Gracey. I think this is going to show it better. Okay.
Okay, so this is my grandmother with 2 of my cousins. It's the only picture that the family has that we know of. Unfortunately, there are no pictures of my grandfather. So as I said, they had 4 sons, and my father Abraham was the youngest of the 4. So our family name changed from Chazma to Sasson because the Arabic letters for K and J are similar, with the exception of a dot placement either above or below the letter. So people would place the dot in the wrong place, and the name became Jazma, which means shoe. So my grandfather didn't like that, and he changed the family's last name to his first name, Sasson, and from then on, he took his middle name, Ezra, as his first name. The family wound up in Sudan because in the early 1900s, Iraq was ruled by the Ottoman Empire, and they mandated that young men, including Jewish boys, should be recruited into their army. My grandmother had an uncle who lived in Sudan. So in 1911, she dressed the 2 older boys who were eligible for draft as girls. And along with the 2 younger sons, they escaped from Iraq to Sudan via Egypt. And my grandfather joined them later on. So as the Jewish community grew, they needed a larger place to worship on Shabbat and on holidays. Most of the Jews contributed whatever they could to build a synagogue, which was built on a major street in Khartoum. It was completed in 1926 and held about 500 people. This is a picture of the exterior of the synagogue. A mikveh was built later on the synagogue's grounds. At the height of Jewish population in Sudan in the 1940s and early 1950s, the synagogue would be filled almost to capacity. Jewish population in Sudan at one point had risen to between 800 to 1,000 people. Besides Shabbat and holiday services, wedding ceremonies always took place in the synagogue, and then they were followed by a dinner reception at either a hotel or sometimes even in people's homes. So as I said, this is the exterior of the synagogue, and it was it had been renamed in honor of my grandfather after he passed away, and it was called Ohel Shlomo Synagogue in Khartoum. This next slide We'll show a picture of the interior of the synagogue. As you'll see, the bima was in the center of the synagogue, along with the men of the congregation, it faced the ark. The women sat separately in a balcony just above, and to honor the elderly women of the congregation, the front row was always reserved for them. The younger women and girls would sit in the rows behind them. My grandfather's sermons were always done, and those of rabbis who followed him, were always done in Arabic because that was the main language that everybody spoke and understood. In this next slide, Carol. Okay, so this is the ark, and it had a brocade curtain, and it housed Sephardic Torahs. Unlike Torahs that we're used to seeing, the scrolls in a Sephardic Torah are encased in a wooden cylindrical container. The ones in this next slide are an example of that. The Torahs that were in the synagogue were covered with a velvet material, and they were topped with silver romanim, similar to the Torah that you see on the left. These, of course, aren't the original Torahs, but they're just an example of a Sephardic Torah and what it looks like when it's opened. While many Jews would ride on Shabbat and on holidays, Yom Kippur was the one day that nobody ever rode. Those who lived close by, as we did, would walk to synagogue, and those who lived farther away would either stay with relatives who lived nearby, or they would sleep inside the synagogue or in the courtyard outside the synagogue on mattresses that they had brought from home. Since we didn't have today's technology and the convenience of knowing when the sun would set, the children would be sent outside to look for the first star that appeared, signaling that night had fallen and the shofar could be blown to end the holiday. On Rosh Hashanah and Pesach, I remember sitting at a huge table in the courtyard of our house with many relatives sitting around enjoying the festival meals. Before the Rosh Hashanah meal, there were several blessings that were made over various types of food, which included dates, pomegranates, spinach, beans, squash, apples that my mother would cook in a honey type of syrup. And we also did blessings on a cooked ram's head instead of fish head. These blessings all began with Yehi Ratzon, and may it be your will. And we prayed to end enmity, to have mitzvot as plentiful as the pomegranate seeds, to increase our merits, to have a good and sweet new year, and to be heads and not tails, or leaders and not stragglers. We had paid servants that my mother had taught how to cook and how to clean. So she would work with them for days preparing all the holiday meals. Matzahs for Passover came in from England, but everything else was prepared at home. When it was time to read the 4 questions, the youngest child would have the afikomen, which was wrapped in a large napkin and then tied around their back. And the child would be asked, "Where are you coming from?" In Arabic, they would ask him, and he would respond, "From Mitzrayim." "And where are you going?" And he would answer, "I am going to Yerushalayim." The Sephardic charoset that we ate, and I still make it here for my family on Passover. It's made of pureed dates with chopped walnuts instead of apples and nuts. Hanukkah was not a major holiday in Sudan. We had a metal Hanukkiah with little cups that would be filled with oil, and it would have a cotton wick placed in the middle. Then each night, the appropriate number of wicks would be lit. Nobody exchanged gifts on Hanukkah. The bigger holiday for us was Purim. My mom and her team of helpers would be working for days, baking all kinds of goodies to make shalach manot for family and for friends. On Purim, the doorbell would be ringing all day long with goodie exchanges from our family and our friends. Children would go to a costume party dressed in very elaborate outfits that their mothers had made for them. Some of my costumes were a hula girl. I was Eve one time with my long hair flowing down my back and complete with an apple tied to my arm and a stuffed snake that was wrapped around my body with its mouth ready to pounce on the apple. I also once went as a shoeshine boy and even a peasant girl with a live goat walking in beside me. In the evening, the adults would have their turn to dress up. One of my aunts once went as a bride and groom. She split her costume in half, and on one side she wore half a groom's tuxedo, and on the other side was half a bridal gown. Another woman once went as either a 3 or 4 tiered wedding cake. So as I said, the costumes were quite elaborate, and a prize would be given to the most original outfit. So these parties were all held at the Jewish Recreation Club, which was established in 1928 in Khartoum, so that people would have somewhere to go in the evening for entertainment. There was a courtyard for young people to either play basketball or soccer, and people could also play ping pong, backgammon, card games. They would listen to music or just converse with each other, catching up on each other's news. Some families also had their sons' bar mitzvah parties at the club. Since there wasn't any catering service, the women in the community would all get together and each one would make her special dish or her special baked good and bring it to the party. Khartoum had 2 movie theaters that showed Egyptian movies which starred Omar Sharif, as well as other Egyptian actors. There were also American movies shown, anything from cowboys and Indians in their westerns to comedies to dramas, and everyone loved the movies, so much so that when my mother and 2 of her sisters were expecting around the same time, they decided to name their children after American movie stars of the time. So our family has an Adolphe, as in Adolphe Manjou, Greta Garbo, of course, and my sister Norma of blessed memory was named after Norma Shearer. There's a park in Khartoum that still exists today where people would go to have a picnic or enjoy the nice weather. The park is called Al Mugran, which means the confluence or meeting of two rivers. As you'll see in this next slide, Carol. Okay, the park got its name because it was the exact spot where the Blue Nile flowing in from the south met with the White Nile that flowed in from the north. And at the meeting point in El Mugran, you can actually see here that one side is visibly blue and the other side is a whitish gray. For schooling, there was one boys' school which was run by Italian brothers and a girls' school that was run by Catholic nuns. During religious classes, Jewish children and children of other religions were not obligated to take those classes. So they were excused and would sit in the back of the classroom, either reading or doing their homework or studying. In the mid-1950s, a British teacher by the name of Mrs. Stainfield established a small school in her house, and that's where I went for 2 years before coming to the United States. One of the major events in Sudan was the annual winter ball season. Aside from Jewish communities in Sudan was also home to Syrian, Greek, Italian, Armenian, and British communities. And each one of them had their own club. And then in December and in January, each group took turns to host a formal ball with men wearing tuxedos and women dressed in very elaborate gowns or cocktail dresses. There were very close personal and professional relationships with everyone. Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike got along very, very well. It was almost, you could say, an idyllic life. Unfortunately, this idyllic life came to an end when Sudan gained its independence in 1956 and hostility toward Jews began to grow. As anti-Semitism grew in Egypt, it started to penetrate directly south to Sudan, and Jewish families started to leave the country. And it wasn't just the Jews who left. Those from the other communities I just mentioned a few minutes ago began to leave Sudan as well. Some of the Jewish families who left came to the United States, or they went to England, to Switzerland, or to Israel. The English language was the second language in Sudan, and we all spoke it and we could read and write it. So my parents decided that it would probably be easiest for us to come to the United States. My two brothers preceded us by 2 months, and they came here to find jobs and a place for the family to live. And then my parents, my sisters and I joined them a few months later, and we arrived, our ship arrived in New York on Labor Day, 1959. Much of the community had left Sudan by 1960. My siblings and I don't recall any anti-Semitism before we left, but we heard that those who stayed after 1960 were subjected to anti-Semitic attacks and even arrest. The emigration of Jews intensified at that point, and by 1973, Jewish life ceased to exist in Sudan. The synagogue was sold to a bank and was eventually demolished, and the Torahs were removed and sent to various synagogues in England, in Switzerland, Israel, and the United States. Sudan had a small Jewish cemetery, and after everyone left, reports had come out that there were cases of vandalism and desecration of the cemetery. So in 1975, a group of families made arrangements to have their relatives' remains, and that included my maternal grandparents' remains. They were moved to a cemetery called Givat Shaul Cemetery in Jerusalem. And they were placed in a section that was marked Sudan Jewish Community Cemetery. Several years ago, a young Jewish Canadian by the name of Chaim Motzen was working on renewable energy products in Africa, and he came upon the cemetery in Sudan with the remaining graves and saw, as you will see here, that it was now used as a dumping ground. So when Sudan's Islamic regime was overthrown in 2019 and diplomatic relations with Israel took place, Chaim took it upon himself and got permission from the new Minister of Religious Affairs to try and restore the cemetery. In January 2020, he personally paid for an archaeologist and people that he trusted to help him clean up and restore the cemetery. They found many of the stones were in fragments, as you'll see in the picture here, and they had to carefully sift through everything, putting aside the fragments and removing tons of garbage and litter that included glass and car parts, medical wastes, and even scorpions and beehives. They removed about 14 truckloads of debris from the site. Chaim and his team worked laboriously for months on end, piecing together the fragments almost like a jigsaw puzzle. And in this next slide, Okay. In this slide here, it finally in 2021, the cemetery was restored, as you can see here, and I think they did a beautiful job in cleaning it up and restoring it to, you know, to make it nice for those people who are still buried there. So when we arrived in the United States, my brothers and sisters found work immediately. I went to school and I was totally bewildered when students would come up to me and ask if I had seen lions and tigers. So I responded, yes, of course I did, in the zoo. They looked at me with a puzzled expression on their face when I said that, because coming from Africa, they thought that wild animals just used to roam around the streets. So life in the Sudan, life in the United States, of course, was totally different from the one we knew in Sudan. We had to make many adjustments, one of them being that we had to learn when shopping for groceries, we had to be sure that we picked up breakfast cereal and not dog food. And coming from a warm climate, we had never seen snow or dealt with extremely cold weather. So that was another major adjustment that we all had to make. And by the way, I still don't like the snow and cold weather. So, but that's another story. Thankfully, though, we all adjusted to our new life and our family did very well in the Sudan. This picture here is of my parents, Allegra and Abraham. That the one on the right was taken on their wedding day, and the one on the left was taken on their wedding day, and the one on the right was from one of my nephew's bar mitzvahs. In this next slide, I'll show you a picture of my brothers and sisters in our younger years. The one on the left there is of the four oldest. That's Susie in the back, Raymond, Janie, and Norma. Sadly, the four of them are no longer with us. The one on the right was one of the formal pictures taken from my brother Solomon's bar mitzvah. And that's my sister Cecile and me standing or sitting next to him. This next slide is, this is what we looked like just a few years later. The top row is my sister Susie, Norma, and Raymond. Then there's Janie and Solomon in the middle row, and Cecile and I are in the bottom row. Each one of the seven of us married someone from a different country. Iraq, Lebanon, Colombia, South America via Poland, Israel, Syria, the United States, and France. And all of us had wonderful families. As my brother Raymond of blessed memory once wrote, and I quote, "The family blended these different backgrounds with different customs in a very harmonious and respectful family togetherness. More importantly, there was always respectful tolerance for its different Sephardic and Ashkenazic customs and varied degrees of its Jewish observance," close quote. So that concludes my presentation. I thank you all for your time. I hope you enjoyed it and found it of interest, and I'll turn it back to you, Carol.
Well, Gracey, you certainly didn't disappoint. Your story is amazing. The fact that your family is here is a tribute to you. And I thank all of them who were able to share some information to help you. The way you presented is so professional. The pictures, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and every one of those pictures, I do believe, has a story in and of itself. So what I'm going to do now, and I can't thank you enough, and I will thank you again. You can be sure of that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions to please raise your hand, and I will unmute so that we keep this without any distractions from background noise. Okay, so let's see.
I don't have any questions because I knew the story very well. But I want to thank you, Gracey. You did a beautiful presentation, and I have to tell you that I am proud to be part of this wonderful family. It's nice to see Shanna and Michelle and everybody, and happy to be here. And Simi, I don't see her, but I know she's there. And I want to wish Marty a happy birthday and Suzanne a happy birthday. And just be well and keep doing these presentations. It's important that the world knows about Jews from all over the world. One of these days, I'll make a presentation about the Jews in Bogota, Colombia, too.
Oh, we would like to hear that. So you can start working.
Okay.
Be careful for what you wish for.
I
You'll be on my programs,
I
right,
know,
Gracey?
I know. But truly, it's an amazing story. The children that came, that were born to Allegra and to Ibrahim Sasson, all of them in their own right were amazing human beings in every way. And each one of them had amazing, beautiful families. And again, I am proud to be part of that.
Thank you so much. Okay, I saw, wait,
think Sheila had a
Sheila. Sheila?
Oh, I don't know if I missed it. Where is the restored cemetery?
It's in Khartoum, Sudan.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. It's a fairly small cemetery. And as I said, when they had started to destroy it, when word came out, some families did move the remains to a cemetery in Jerusalem, and but there were still many others. There's Simi. That's my other niece, Simi, who lives in Brooklyn, actually. Okay.
Welcome,
All
Simi.
right.
Do you want to say something? Since
Thank you.
you're-
Hi. Hi, sorry, I was in and out a few times, but I was listening to everything, and I think it's remarkable. Sometimes as the younger generation, you get bits and pieces, but you never get really the full flow. You know, we'll ask questions here and there, but it was very nice to hear everything presented so beautifully. I thank you, Auntie Gracey. I'm proud to be part of this family and to pass on the traditions and the heritage to my children, God willing.
Thank you, Simi. You said it beautifully, and it is true. Nadine, before you leave, did you want to say something?
I'll just add my my same thanks and appreciation to Auntie Gracey. You really did present beautifully, and the pictures that you put together were beautiful. And I echo everything my mom and Simi said about being really proud to be a part of this family. You know, as a kid growing up, you know, in central New Jersey, it seemed so strange that most of my friends' grandparents, you know, lived in Brooklyn and in New York and came from there. And like my story was so different that like people didn't know what to make of it. But as you know, the appreciation of it as I've grown older and I work in the Jewish community, and it just is a remarkable story and fills me also and my kids with pride. So I'm sorry that I have to go because I have a work meeting that I have to get to. You did a great job, Auntie Gracey.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
So this is being recorded, and hopefully it will be successful,
Are you kidding?
and it will go on our website. We have a program at the synagogue called Every Plaque Has a Story, where we have about 2,500 memorial plaques. And I thought a number of years ago that we needed to know about those people, and we didn't know anything about them. And so people have been filling out a form and telling us their stories. But as I talked to Gracey, she summed it up beautifully because she said, Carol, every one of us has a story. It's not just the people who are not here, but it's the people who are here now. And so some of our programs have focused on our people because I think they're very important and we need to learn about them. And you really connected your whole family today, which is, it's a miracle in itself. Truly. So how about our Rodeph Sholom family, my Zoomers? Does anybody have any questions? Erica, you have a question? Wait, hold on, Erica. Okay.
Carol, I just want to thank you and thank you, Gracey. Amazing story. I'm all teared up, choking. So thank you so much for sharing. We know each other a long time, but I didn't know all this, and it's wonderful. And it is a miracle. Thank you.
Debbie is our president for Gracey's family, who doesn't know her.
Oh, okay. So Gracey, when you came to the United States, did you all settle in New York?
I'm sorry?
And when you first
No.
came to the United States, where did you all settle and where did everybody move to in the United States?
Okay, so we settled in North Bergen, New Jersey. One of my uncles, who was one of the first people to come here, had originally settled there. And as the cousins and other families came, we somehow seemed to all live in that area. We stayed in North Bergen for about a year, and then we moved to Jersey City. And we were there about 3 years until the family finally moved to Clifton, New Jersey, which is in Passaic County, if you're familiar with that. And as the years went by, well, I hadn't mentioned that 2 of my sisters were married before we came here. So they remained in the Sudan and eventually came here. The oldest, Susie, her husband could not adjust to American life. So they, about a year later, they made Aliyah to Israel, and that's where they lived. Their children are there. One of them has returned to the United States. The other sister, Norma, came with her family. Unfortunately, her husband died in a car accident in Sudan, and she came here later with her 3 small children. So again, in New Jersey, predominantly the family lives in New Jersey. My brother Raymond, blessed memory, and his wife Adela, and their kids lived in East Brunswick, New Jersey. And now their youngest, which I just saw, Leslie Teicher, is here as well. Hi, Leslie. And she's in Teaneck, which is Bergen County. And Joanna lives in Toronto, but she's visiting in Jersey. And Nadine is in Chicago. My sister Janie has always lived in New Jersey, as her kids did as well. They still do live there. Solomon is in New Jersey as well, and he and his wife, but all 4 of his children live in Brooklyn. And Cecile was in North Jersey, and she and Marty retired, must be about 20 years ago or so, to Middle Jersey, around Toms River, New Jersey, the shore area. And their kids are, David is in New Jersey. Michelle just moved recently with her husband, Chris, to Tennessee, and Shauna is in Alabama. And we, of course, because Charlie used to work for IBM, were relocated to Connecticut. We lived in North Jersey, and we relocated with our son about 30 years ago now. Wow. And so our son lives in Shelton next to you, Debbie. And that's the story.
Thank you. Bob, you have a question?
Gracey, how did you meet Charlie?
Oh, that was my question.
Charlie and I, there was like in Jersey, where he's from Paterson, New Jersey, and there was a young adult group that hosted dances for young Jewish people to meet. And that's actually where we met. And they actually, as fate would have it, they placed Charlie and me at the door to collect, whatever the charge was. So we started talking, and pretty soon he asked me out on a date, and here's where we are today. Actually, 50 years later, this past August, we've been married.
Kind of horror, and he's a great Frenchman for that.
Yes, he is.
Thank you.
Merci bien.
Suzanne?
Okay.
So Gracie, I am going to embarrass you now. When you're talking about meeting Charlie,
Yeah.
we were already married. Your brother and I were already married. And I think at the time we were living at your parents' house because we were about to move to a house in Clifton that wasn't quite ready. But whatever, after you were dating Charlie for a few months, maybe, your mother came to us and said, you have to go and talk to Charlie. I want to know what's going on, and I want to know if this is going to be an engagement, because I don't want this to be going on like forever. I said, who said no to your mother? Nobody could say no to your mother. Your mother, and I mean, you had to do it. So I said, oh my God, I said to Raymond, how are we gonna go talk to Charlie and ask him this? But we did. So, so there you are. So you have to thank us for having this, because otherwise you might still be going out with Charlie.
I just want to add that one of the fondest memories of my childhood is that I was the flower girl at my Aunt Gracey and Uncle Charlie's wedding.
Yeah.
How nice. That's great. Gracie, I might have missed something, but I know you told me there was an Iraq connection. What was the Iraq connection?
That's where my father's parents are from. My father was actually born in Iraq, and I had told the story how it was under Ottoman rule, and the men had to join the army, and so my grandmother had a relative in Sudan, and she had the two older boys were ready for draft, and so she dressed them as girls and took the younger boys with her, and she had an uncle in Sudan, and that's how they came from Iraq. They were originally from Baghdad, Iraq, and that's where my father was born.
Eli, but be careful.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Let's do.
Okay, so this is a paid political announcement. On Sunday morning at 9:30, I want you to know that our new associate rabbi, Rabbi Shaul Praver, will be talking at 9:30 about my grandmother's synagogue on the Lower East Side. And it's the synagogue I believe his grandmother helped form. He's got also an amazing story, because we know everybody does. And I don't think that you will want to miss him. So everybody is welcome. It's the same link that you all use to come on our Coffee and Conversations. It's the same link for services. And we welcome you. We encourage people to come. This is why we are doing these Zoom programs, to make it available, make an opportunity available when it's cold and it's not safe to be outside in this brutal weather. So I'm going to bring this program to a close. And one more time, I'm going to thank you, Gracie. You were fabulous. I learned so much, and it's not the first time I heard it, because I heard it yesterday and I learned more today. So I thank you for saying yes. You were so easy to work with, such a pleasure. Thank you, Charlie, for being such a great audience. You can come now and show your face.
You're welcome.
And thank you to all the family members for coming on, because you just made the story even better. So thank you all.
Fabulous. It was nice to meet all of you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to see everyone. Auntie Gracie was beautiful. It was so nice just to get to listen and to see all the pictures. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Very welcome.
And Charlie too. Charlie, Minion tonight at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Thank you, Auntie
You can
Gracie.
do
It was
that-
very
you can do
well
Myra.
done.
You can do
You'll
Myra,
be
Charlie.
getting a
Thanks,
mailing.
everybody. Thank you.
You'll be
Okay,
getting
bye-bye.
a mailing with a number of programs, including our blood drive, lifeline screening, vaccine day, lots of things happening at Rodeph Sholom, as always. So keep your eyes open. It's going out in the mail within the next day or so. And watch the website, watch your emails. Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Carol.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye,
you.
everybody.
Good
Thanks for
program.
coming.
Amazing, Auntie Gracie. Bye, everybody. So
Nice
good to
seeing
see
you.
everyone in the family.
Okay. Take care.